Hey everybody, welcome to the Baby Lock Ovation Serger Manual. Today what I want to do is answer some questions that I received about the cover hem. We're actually going to sew a cover hem today. If you're working with the Ovation, that serger actually does three amazing kinds of cover hem: a narrow cover hem, a wide cover hem, and a triple cover hem. Today we're going to be dealing with the wide cover hem. Really, the process of doing these variations of cover hems would be very, very similar. So I thought I'd pick the wide cover hem because it shows the greatest distance between the threads and the back, and I think it's pretty clear to see if your tension is correct. And then if you want to try these other ones and you have questions, you can post them below, and I will help you with that. What I want to do first is show you two cover hems that I sewed here, and this one right here is sewn with the tension set properly, and you can see that it creates a nice zigzag pattern, and then the needles meet the loopers on the sides and everything looks nice and straight, and there's no loose loops at all. Then I want to show you an example of when the tension's not set exactly right. You can see this lower line, the lower line right here, where it's not creating a nice smooth straight line. And that's because when I stitched this sample, I had my tension on the chain looper set to chain stitch. So one of the unique things about doing a cover hem or a chain stitch on the Ovation is there's actual tension settings. So that's the first thing you want to pay attention to. When you're doing the overlock stitches, you're doing a stitch setting A, B, C, or D, and it sets the tension up for you. When you're working with the cover stitches, you actually have to pay attention to the tension settings yourself. Okay, so you can see over here there's a knob. This is the tension setting knob for your chain looper, and you can see there's a solid gold line right here, and on the outer side of the knob it says cover stitch. So this solid gold line is the setting for the cover stitch tension, and then you'll notice the line is solid up to here. So that's the range in which you can play with it if it's not stitching properly. When I stitched that sample I showed you that was not correct, I had the tension set way over here in the chain stitch region of the tension. All right, so you want to make sure you have it in the cover stitch range, and that allows the thread enough to relax and create that zigzag without pulling the sides of your stitch in. So that's what you saw on the sample. It was a little bit too tight because I hauled it all the way over here and it started pulling in the stitching. All right, so that's your first dial you need to pay attention to. On the other side, over here, you've got the needle tension dial. And you can see it goes from 0 all the way up to 9. And obviously the higher the number, the tighter your needle tension is going to be. If you see little loops along the underside of your stitch, you're going to want to tighten this up. We're going to start with it on 5. Somewhere between 4 and 6 is a good place to start. But if I'm getting loops or loose stitching, I'm going to tighten that up. Okay, so those are the two different things you need to worry about in terms of setting your machine up. The first thing I'm going to do is just show you how to stitch if you're working with a straight piece of fabric, so not in the circle or not in the round. That's what I'm going to show you first. And you can see I've got my thread, everything is all set up. If you have any more questions about setting your serger up for a cover hem, click the link below. I'll put it in the comments, and that will bring you right to the how to set up your serger for a cover hem. All right, so I've got everything set up properly, and I've got my tensions set. I just wanted to check those with you. Okay, so you can see I've put these pins in the fabric. That's actually marking the very edge of the hem I have turned under. Depending on the fabric you're working with, you may want to use some double-sided fusible tape to secure the hem down and to give it some stability. This is a pretty hefty knit, so I'm not going to do that, but make sure you check and test, do a sample to see if you actually need to stabilize the edge of your fabric before you stitch your hem. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put this underneath my needles. When you start stitching for the very first time, you want fabric under the needles. So I'm going to make sure when I put my needles down, it's catching the very end of the fabric. The other thing I'm going to make sure is that my left needle is just right along the edge of the hem from the underneath, and I can see the indentation in this fabric, and I'm going to use this first hatch mark on the front of the presser foot as a guide. I know it's hard to see on the video, but it runs right along here. So I want the left needle to be right along that edge, that way I won't have to trim, and it will actually cover up the raw edge of the hem on the wrong side. So I'm just going to start stitching. When I get to the end of my seam, if I'm just doing straight lengths of fabric, I'm going to use a scrap of fabric. I call this a stitch pad, and I'm going to stitch right onto this. And that just keeps everything running smoothly. So cover stitches really like to have fabric under the needles when you're stitching. So I'm just going to reach on back here and I'm going to clip the threads. All right, you can see how nicely that looks. I didn't quite catch it all the way down, but I was pretty close. Okay, and I don't have any of the specialty feet or hem guides that you can get for this machine. This is just a down and dirty how to do it without any extra accessories. But you can see that looks really cool. Very nice hem. And like I said at the beginning, you could do a narrow version or a 3-needle, a triple cover hem as well. You would do it exactly the same way. The thing is, a lot of times when you do a cover hem, you're in a circle. You're either doing the hem of a t-shirt or the hem of a pant leg. So I want to show you how to work with a circle of fabric so you can see how to start and stop. So I think this is pretty cool, just to show you. I did 2 different wide cover hems to attach this together. And you can see on the wrong side it made this kind of cool double row of stitching. Just because I was fooling around, I didn't want to unthread it for a cover hem and then serge it together and then thread it back up for a cover hem. So I used the cover hem to actually seam this piece of fabric into a circle. And the way I did it was I overlapped the pieces and sewed them flat. Okay, so that's a really cool way to work with like exercise projects where you don't want a bulky seam rubbing against your skin. You can just overlap your ends and stitch down. So I'm going to show you an easy way to clear the threads without pulling and getting multiple threads that you don't need. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start by showing you what happens if you just pull your fabric out. Okay, so I've lifted my needles, I'm going to raise my presser foot, and I'm going to pull my stitch pad out, and look at all those threads we have. If I clip over here, they're just caught on the looper, so if I pull out the extra threads, I can end up with 3 again. Alright, so now here's the 3 I should have had. Alright, so now we're going to sew in a circle, and when I'm finished sewing the circle, I'm going to show you how to prevent all those threads from getting caught on the looper when you pull your fabric out. The right side is face up, so I'm sewing inside the circle. So what I've done is I've turned the t-shirt pant leg inside out, and I'm going to start usually right before a side seam in the back or right before the inseam on a pant leg, because that's the most inconspicuous place to start and stop. So again, I'm going to line it up so my needle is going to be lining up with the edge of my hem underneath. Okay, and I'm just going to start stitching, and I'm going to stitch all the way around. Alright, so as I approach my start point, I'm going to just stitch until I overlap it like a 1/4 of an inch. And as I get really close, I'm actually going to turn the hand wheel with my hand, and I'm not going to press on the gas. That way I can really control how much I'm overlapping, and I'm making sure that the needles are hitting my original start point. I'm just going to go 3 stitches in. Alright, so this is where I want to stop. What I'm going to do is I'm going to lift my needles up as high as they can go. I'm going to use my tweezers to scoop the threads from underneath the needle like this. And then I'm going to raise the presser foot like that. And I'm going to pull them forward a little bit. And then what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to clip them down by the presser foot. Okay, so I still have tails for my needles, and I now can pull this out, and you can see I only have the threads that need to be there, so I don't have that mess of threads. Alright, so an easy way to get these top threads to the underside is to actually use a needle and just sew them to the other side. If you try to pick them through with your tweezers, sometimes what can happen is as you're trying to tease the threads to the other side, you can actually tease your stitch apart. And let me show you, that's exactly what I did right here. See, I was trying to tease the threads apart, and I actually ended up unsewing part of my stitch. So the better way to do it would be to actually take a sewing needle and just stitch it right through to the wrong side. Then I would hit it with fray check, wait for it to dry, and then trim them. That's how I would finish this. Now you can see here, one other thing I want to show you. See how I didn't quite make it along the edge exactly? You can actually trim that closer if you want to get a really neat finish. So let me just show you how easy that is. Okay, so all you really need is a little pair of scissors, and start, somewhere along your hem, and then just, run your scissors along the edge like this, gently pulling the tail you're making, and it's really easy to get that edge of the fabric really close to your stitching. Alright, so you can see that looks pretty neat, and I didn't use any special accessory feet. I just used the regular foot that comes with the machine. I think on a future video you'll see how to use the hem guide that you can get for this machine. That's will be something I will be working on in the future. If you have any questions or comments about how to sew a cover hem with the Ovation, please post them below, or you can visit my blog at J Stern Designs. I hope you guys have a great day, and I will see you again soon.